On the 24th of November, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving, a man in a dark suit and tie bought a one-way ticket for a short flight from Portland to Seattle. He gave the name Dan Cooper. He was somewhere around his mid-40s, unremarkable looking, and he ordered a bourbon and soda. Shortly after takeoff, he handed the flight attendant a note. She initially assumed it was a phone number and put it in her pocket unread, and he leaned over and told her quietly that she should look at it, because he had a bomb. He opened a briefcase and showed her what appeared to be red cylinders and wiring. He asked for $200,000 in $20 bills and 4 parachutes. He got all of it. And then, somewhere over the forests of southwest Washington, in darkness and rain, he lowered the rear stairs of the aircraft and jumped. Nobody has ever established who he was. What is striking about the account of that flight is how calm it was. The aircraft was a Boeing 727 with only 36 passengers aboard, and the hijacker's demands were passed to the ground while the plane circled Seattle. He was, by the consistent testimony of the crew, polite, composed and unusually knowledgeable. He knew the aircraft. He specified that the money be in negotiable American currency, and when the parachutes were being arranged he rejected military-issue chutes in favor of civilian ones, and asked for front-mounted reserve parachutes as well. On landing at Seattle he exchanged the passengers for the money and the parachutes, keeping several crew members aboard, and instructed the plane to take off again for Mexico City, specifying a low-altitude, low-speed configuration with the flaps at a particular setting and the landing gear down. Then he told the remaining crew to go into the cockpit and stay there. The 727 had a feature that very few airliners had, and it is central to the whole story. It has a set of stairs that fold down from underneath the tail, and crucially, on that aircraft they could be opened in flight. Somewhere over southwest Washington, at roughly 10,000 feet, in rain and darkness and near freezing air, the crew felt a change in the aircraft's trim consistent with the stairs going down and someone leaving. When the plane landed in Reno, he was gone, along with the money, 1 parachute and 2 reserve chutes. He left behind his tie, with a tie clip, 8 cigarette butts, and no fingerprints that were ever matched. The physical evidence recovered from the aircraft was thin, and the conditions he jumped into were genuinely severe, with the temperature at altitude well below freezing, in a business suit and a raincoat, into forest at night with no way of knowing where he was. The search that followed was one of the largest in the history of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Agents combed the projected drop zone on foot with military assistance, and the area was searched repeatedly over subsequent years, and no body, parachute or equipment was recovered. The investigation ran for 45 years. The Bureau processed over 1,000 suspects, and eventually reduced that to a much smaller list of persons of interest, none of whom could be conclusively tied to the crime. The serial numbers of the ransom money had been recorded, and lists were circulated widely to banks, casinos, and businesses. Not one of those bills turned up in circulation anywhere. That absence is itself a significant piece of evidence, though people disagree about what it proves. It is consistent with a man who died on landing, and it is equally consistent with a man disciplined enough never to spend a marked note. Then, in 1980, 8 years later, a boy digging a fire pit on a sandy bank of the Columbia River, at a spot called Tenor Bar, found 3 bundles of decaying $20 bills, around $5,800 in total. The serial numbers matched the ransom. It remains the only piece of the money ever recovered, and rather than solving anything it deepened the problem, because the location did not fit the presumed flight path well and the condition of the bills raised questions. The bundles were still banded, and the notes had degraded in a way that experts have argued about ever since, with disagreement over how long they had been in the ground and whether they arrived by river deposition or were buried. Geological analysis of the sand layers above and below them has been used to argue for very different timelines, none of which reconciles neatly with the money simply washing downstream from the drop zone in 1971. The suspect list has been long and mostly unsatisfying. The name that stuck came from a reporting error because a man named D.B. Cooper was briefly questioned early on and eliminated, but a wire service picked up the name and it replaced the Dan Cooper the hijacker had actually used. Over the decades, candidates have included a man who confessed to his family on his deathbed, a former paratrooper, a Boeing employee, and a man whose niece presented a guitar strap as evidence. Some had genuine points in their favor and everyone has had a serious problem, usually an alibi, a physical mismatch with crew descriptions, or an absence of anything beyond a family claim. The Bureau formally suspended active investigation in 2016, redirecting resources, while noting it would still evaluate physical evidence such as the parachutes or the money if it surfaced. Private researchers have continued, including work on particles found on the recovered tie. The most interesting question is not who he was but whether he survived. An expert opinion has consistently leaned toward no. He jumped at night, in rain, into heavily forested and mountainous terrain, at a temperature far below freezing at altitude, wearing a business suit, loafers, and a raincoat, with no helmet, no boots, no reserve of the kind an experienced jumper would want, and no ability to see where he was going. One of the parachutes he took was a training chute that had been sewn shut and was non-functional, which suggests he did not inspect his equipment as closely as a skilled parachutist would. Against that, the crew's testimony about his knowledge of the aircraft and his specific requests about flap settings and altitude indicate somebody with real aviation familiarity. Those two observations pull in opposite directions, and reconciling them is essentially the whole debate about who he was. The practical consequences were immediate and lasting. Within a few years, every 727 in service had been fitted with a simple device, a mechanical vane on the rear stairs that is pushed by the airflow and prevents them from being lowered in flight. It is known in the industry as the Cooper vane, and it is arguably the only aviation modification in history named after a criminal. The hijacking also arrived at the peak of an extraordinary wave. In the late 1960s and early 70s, the United States experienced a remarkable number of aircraft hijackings, many for transport to Cuba, and Cooper inspired a run of imitators demanding money and parachutes, most of whom were caught quickly. That wave was a major driver of universal passenger screening, which was introduced across American airports in 1973, and which is the reason everyone now empties their pockets before a flight. The reason this case has never let go of people is that it is one of the very few genuinely unsolved crimes where almost every detail is known except the one that matters. We know the flight number and the seat. We know what he ordered to drink and what he was wearing. We have his tie. We have the serial numbers of every note he took and the knowledge that not one of them was ever spent. What we do not have is a name, a body, or a plausible complete account of what happened after the stairs went down. It is the only unsolved skyjacking in American history, and the most likely explanation, the one investigators have generally favored, is deeply unsatisfying, which is that he almost certainly died on landing in the forest that night and the evidence of it has simply never been found in country that swallows things easily.